Well, it was the first time that Tottenham Hotspur scored a 90th minute goal in a Premier League game and haven't gone on to win. They thought they had when Richarlison had stuck it home. He ripped his shirt off. He ran into the crowd. Thomas Frank got excited. So did everyone in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But then they forgot to mark Matthijs de Ligt from a 96th minute corner. This just sort of underscores, I think, the lack of consistency that Tottenham Hotspur have shown over the course of 2025, Crook.
Yeah, but you asked the question about the Arsenal game. Was it a point gained or two drop? You can ask the same question of Manchester United. And I was still more frustrated that they didn't win the game than the fact ultimately they've ended up managing to rescue a point. Because 1-0 up, they played really well in the first half. I think Ruben Amorim got his tactics spot on with the false number 9 of Cunha. Amad played really well and Bumo got his customary goal against Spurs. And they had opportunities to put the game to bed. Benjamin Šeško, after coming off the bench, has had 2 huge chances. The first one, Mason Mount has played a lovely ball to set him away and he was just too slow to get the ball out from under his feet. In the second, when he's ended up getting injured, when he didn't get the shot away quickly enough. If one of those goes in, United are back on the bus. They're going up the M6 and they've won the game. They then managed to find themselves 2-1 behind. Good character to come back and get the equaliser. But ultimately, I think it's 2 points drop for United.
Okay, Kevin, I asked him a question about Tottenham and he gave me an answer about Manchester United. The question was about Tottenham because Tottenham are in a position where the fans aren't entirely
I thought Tottenham were poor for most of the game.
Well, okay, you've had your say and you went on about Manchester United. So let's ask Kevin for a more sort of considered answer about Tottenham because there is a disconnect between fans and ownership, definitely, but I think there's still the jury's out on Thomas Frank, which is weird in a sense because you know that if they'd won that game, they were literally one de Ligt header away from being second in the table at lunchtime on Saturday. Yet there is a little bit of dissatisfaction, and that was sort of exemplified by the fact that when Matthijs Tel replaced Xavi Simons in the second half of the game, there were boos from the Tottenham Hotspur fans. Yeah. And actually, then Tel gets the equaliser, which almost powered them to victory. It was a comeback that then should have really resulted in 3 points.
I think the first thing about Tottenham is you mentioned injuries for Arsenal earlier. They're missing some really creative players. No Kulusevski, no Maddison. That's huge because what they are the guys that can build on the defensive structure that I think he's been working on in the opening weeks and months of the season. Because the truth is, Ange Postecoglou wins the Europa League. That is a massive achievement that nobody should ever take away because Tottenham do not win trophies in general. So that is a huge success for him. However, the structure of the team was not conducive to winning points in the Premier League. There was clear proof of that. And what Thomas Frank's done is he's come in. He's a pragmatist at heart, right? He sees problems. He wants to fix them. He wants to get the defensive structure right. However, when you play as poorly in attack as they do at the moment, you are always going to invite criticism. And the raw material should be there. You know, you've got Kolo Muani, you've got Xavi, but I think they're still adapting. So they are really bad at home when teams don't necessarily give them space to play. When they can counter-attack, as they did at Everton really, really well, and they made the most of set pieces recently, then that plays into their hands. So it's going to be a painful period, I think, for a while he gets that balance right and while he has those key players out. He's got a lot of young attacking players. I was so pleased for Tel because I think he's better than he's showing. I genuinely do think that. I think there's something there. And I actually think Bayern made a rare mistake when they let him go because I think they've actually got a slot for him. He could have played the Jackson role this season and been perfectly good. I think he could have done a fine job. So I'm pleased for him. Thought Odegaard was excellent in the closing stages of the game. So it's very much a work in progress. And I think Spurs fans need to show a little bit of patience. We're not looking at Conte ball necessarily. You know, I think in the long run, they'll be more exciting, but it is going to take a while to get there.
Well, they have to be, don't they? Because they're not exciting at the moment. And, you know, talking to Spurs fans at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Saturday, one of them come up to me and said, you know what, the fact is that we played just as badly, really, against Everton as we did in maybe even the home game against Chelsea. The difference was we got 2 set-piece goals, and that gave us a little bit of room, and it, puts a little lick of paint on the place, and everyone feels a lot better about it because you've got 3 points. So they have been sort of trudging through and getting results when maybe the performances have been pretty staid. I was at the Newcastle game in the Carabao Cup and they were pretty poor in that as well. But one of the issues I've sort of identified, I think you've sort of mentioned this as well, is the fact that their quality in the final third is just not good enough. But they should be better, shouldn't they? Because despite the injuries, they have got Tell, they have got Kolo Muani. This is, players that have either they've spent a lot of money on or who are worth a lot of money in the market. Simons, who actually I thought played well for most of the games, his best performance I saw in the Premier League at the weekend. They have Kudus. I know it wasn't available at the weekend, but they have had him available for most of the season, a good player. Odegaard, you've already mentioned. Bergvall, who's excellent, a real talent. I know he's been out for a week because of concussion protocols, but for most of the season, he's been there as well. Sarr is great at driving with the ball and good, long, accurate passes. And Pedro Porro's delivery into the box is usually absolutely spot on. The issue you've got here, and I know Solanke's injured, but they just don't have anyone to put the ball in the net with any regularity. That is a major, major issue, especially bearing in mind they've spent a lot of money in that area, Crook.
Yeah, I mean, Solanke's been a massive loss, and it's ironic because he was hardly ever injured at Bournemouth. He obviously missed games last season for Spurs, and we don't know when we're going to see him back this season. So I think that's a big problem. Obviously, I've mentioned Ivan Toney. That seems to be gathering a little bit of momentum now, but from what I'm told, it's going to be difficult to get him out of Saudi Arabia in January because of the tax implications. Also, I know there's been suggestions that by coming back to the Premier League, he might get in the England squad. He won't. I think Thomas Tuchel has already made his mind up in that regard. But they are lacking at the top end of the pitch. And you mentioned Pedro Porro there. As good as he is going forward, I'm still not entirely convinced about him as a defender.
Okay. They've got a big week when they come back because they have got a away trip, which they like away trips, to Arsenal when they come back in the North London derby. And then they've got a few more Champions League games to get their teeth into. I think PSG is their next one after that as away from home, just a couple of days after they play against Arsenal. So there's a big week for Tottenham when they come back from the international break.